After much reflection and in consultation with leadership of the General Assembly, I've come to the conclusion that it would be helpful to move legislation this week that makes it clear that this law does not give businesses a right to deny services to anyone.
The discourse that has an entire nation talking and arguing, and for which there seems no solid answers that would make everybody happy. Let's get to it. Welcome to MidPoint. He's a staff writer for the website Salon, and his focus is politics. A scathing article from his keyboard slamming the Indiana decision gets us rolling. Let's welcome Elias Isquith. And also as part of the discussion, she is the investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner, Sarah Westwood. I thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's go ahead and get to work here. Elias, I hit you here first because late word is coming in that the Arkansas governor has said that he will ask the General Assembly to recall the religion bill. And this is the one sitting on his desk, much like the one that's in Indiana right now. Does this mean that those who are against this law basically have these governments and these states on the run?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that he wants to see some language put into the bill that would clarify, like what Governor Pence just said, that it would not allow any sort of businesses to refuse service if they feel it would go against their religion. I think it's very clear that right now, at least, the supporters of this bill are losing the political fight. It's pretty rare that that you have liberals and Walmart on the same page. So yeah, I think it's right now at least just the pure politics are going against.
Elias, why is it that Indiana has all of a sudden become this flashpoint when this law has been on the books in many states before?
Well, my understanding is there's a little bit of difference between this law and some of the versions in other states and federally, in the sense that the Indiana law specifies that private actors, that the law would apply and protect private actors who don't want to provide services. But even if that, that aside, I think the biggest reason is just because the culture has changed, especially in the last 5 years or so, in terms of the power and the relevance of the LGBT gay rights movement, and things that people who are sympathetic to that movement or part of that movement used to take as sort of, that's the way it is, we have to deal with it. Now they feel more emboldened to, cause a fuss over a law that they think is first and foremost signaling a lack of respect for their, for their citizenship, their rights, so forth.
Sarah, is that just it? Has the culture really changed and changed so drastically then overnight with one decision? Or is this also part and parcel of the fact that the LGBT community has a tremendous amount of clout in this country and it's growing every day?
It's absolutely a little bit of both. Obviously, when this law was first put in place at the federal level and in 19 other states, it was intended to protect religious minorities. But the Indiana law is being enacted against a backdrop of a larger national shift in favor of gay marriage rights. And so people are more sensitive to the implications that it might have for the LGBT community. While that's important to keep in mind, this law was in no way intended explicitly to discriminate against gay people.
Doesn't that need to be made over and over again, Sarah? Because that's the point that the governor in Indiana is making, and many of the religionists are making as well, that this was not argued. And by the way, Elias, I'll let you get in on this as well in just a moment. But the fact that this was not meant, and they say the language was not meant to go against anybody in the LGBT community.
Absolutely not. It never once mentions the issue of gay rights within the language of this bill. It was really originally intended to protect citizens from infringement on their religious beliefs from the government. And so that was, the spirit of the law in all of the other states that it was enacted in. And as Governor Pence has come out and said, that was the intention in Indiana. And so what he's likely to do in the coming days and weeks is to codify the anti-discrimination pledges that he's been making, just to assure the LGBT community that this law does what he says it does, which is simply to protect religious freedom and nothing else.
Just real quick, Sarah, because we do have to take a break, and Elias, I promise I will get to you, but in 20 seconds here, Sarah, wouldn't it have been smart if Governor Pence would have looked at this first and made sure that what he was signing was the right bill the first time, because the backup is what really has done damage?
Well, it was never intended to be discriminatory, and a lot of people who have done a thoughtful analysis of the bill have concluded that it isn't discriminatory, so it wasn't necessarily not the right bill in the first place.
Okay, we want to talk about that when we come back. Elias, Isquith, and Sarah Westwood, please stand by. We're going to talk a little bit more about the fixing of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and what is really the problem here and how do we solve it for both sides. Back to work on more than just one decision by Indiana. Welcome back to MidPoint. Staff writer for the website Salon, Elias Isquith, and the investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner, Sarah Westwood. Elias, I'm going to come to you on this one right now because I mentioned this before the break. There is no mention of the LGBT community in this bill. And what about those people who say this is there to protect, and by the way, I want to quote something here, to protect religious beliefs? Because here's the Republican State Rep Bob Ballinger. What my bill was focused on was to let somebody believe what they want to believe, carry out that belief, and not have the state interfere with it. So how do you answer those two issues?
Sure. Well, I mean, frankly, I think the fact that the LGBT community isn't explicitly named in these bills doesn't mean that the bills weren't designed within the context of that broader movement and the phenomenon of same-sex marriage.
So you think there's no doubt in your mind that this bill was specifically made in their minds and the representative of others to target the LGBT community, but not use those words?
Well, I wouldn't say target. I mean, because I think that the beliefs of the people who support this bill are quite sincere in that they believe that what, it's a little bit of, it depends on which side you look at it from. From my perspective, what they're trying to protect is a form of discrimination. From their perspective, it's part of their religious belief that they can't, for example, cater a same-sex wedding. So, I mean, I do think that it is pretty clear that that was the kind of scenario that the law was designed to address. I wouldn't say that it was intended as a witch hunt or something like that against the LGBT community.
But you are admitting, though, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, that this was meant to protect people of a certain religious belief, yes?
Well, no, I'm not going to go that far, again, because I think it's quite subjective. I mean, there are plenty of people who feel that catering a same-sex wedding goes against their belief. There are also religious people who don't feel that that would be in conflict with what they believe. So, I mean, I'm happy to say that the bill was designed to either allow people to refuse services in that situation and feel that the law is on their side. I'm not going to say that it was, an attempt to protect people.
Okay, well, Sarah, let me get to you then. Is this then, as you see it, the protection issue that is here? Again, here's another quote from the state rep. If it's a butcher who is Muslim and doesn't deal in pork, you can't make him deal in pork. If it's a Christian who is against same-sex marriage, you can't make him perform a same-sex marriage. To the side who follows along with Mike Pence and others, they think that's pretty simply put.
You're exactly right. That butcher example is a great example. The media has perhaps been a little bit irresponsible in reporting this, and it's important not to conflate an outright denial of services, which no one would dispute is discrimination, with declining to participate in a faith-based ceremony that directly contradicts someone's religious beliefs. Whether or not that this law will grant them protection in the case that the same-sex couple who was denied wedding services sues is totally dependent on the situation and the ideological leanings of the judge. It just gives them one more bullet in the chamber for their First Amendment rights in the event that they are taken to court over their faith-based denial.
I guess part of it here, Sarah, is, and you mentioned the media in this, and there are those who believe that this was really used as a jumping-off point to go after Mike Pence because of what have been looked at in the past as some of his beliefs. Do you follow with those who say that some members of the left are just using Mike Pence and this was a perfect time to attack him?
I think there are a lot of factors that are going into the vicious attacks on Mike Pence. One of them could be that he has been vocal about a possible 2016 run. This is a way to kind of nip that in the bud for some of his opponents. But these laws, it's important to keep in mind, are nothing new. This is not an unprecedented assault on any group's rights by any means, and so it's important to keep that in mind when having discussions about this law.
Elias, I got about a minute left here, and you brought up some good points, so is Sarah here, but look, we have two groups of people here who both want to be protected and be able to practice as they believe they want to believe. How do we solve this, though, and still protect it at both sides?
Well, that's part of the problem or the challenge of pluralistic society, I suppose. I mean, in some sense, I think the best way for these things to be resolved is, as much as possible, not within the courtroom. I think that these are mainly conversations that citizens and people need to have amongst one another, and just let the culture change as it will. I think that, the thing to keep in mind here is that even supporters of this law are happy to say that the likelihood of, the hypothetical baker winning his case is small. So this was a symbolic gesture, I think, in a large sense. And in that way, it's just part of the broader, normal push and pull of cultural change in our society.
I'll give you 10 seconds here. Do you think, as some people believe, that this was an attack to go after Mike Pence?
I mean, I'm sure there's some people who think that that was a side benefit, but we saw this controversy in Arizona last year, and we're going to see it in Arkansas. I don't think it's a conspiracy on that scale.
We have got all kinds of scales that we're going to be talking about on this one for a while, because, again, we need to get to the point of where both sides are at least satisfied that they are being protected. I think that is the biggest issue here that we still have to look at. Elias Isquith, excellent article on the pages of Salon, the digital pages. And Sarah Westwood, thank you so much for joining us as well. Look forward to talking to you both.
Thanks.
All right, take care. It is a simple question, but the answer might be more complicated than you think about refusing the right to serve anyone.